Hello and welcome back everyone, we Weeb Online, and today I'm gonna continue the story What If Naruto Became a Cyber Demon Part 7. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Naruto had to admit, 2 days after arriving in Los Angeles, that it was nice to have some alone time without having to worry about following orders, getting shot at, or getting blown up. After successfully bringing Sniper Wolf, Johnny, and Meryl to Russia, he begged Olga to allow them to join the Gurlukovich mercenaries. Sergei didn't question him further, only inquiring about their status as survivors of the abortive Shadow Moses incident. With that, he was able to free them. When he had a clear opportunity to do so, he would get in touch with them to make sure everything was going according to plan and to let them know what he planned to do next. He now owed Olga a huge favor going forward, but he could handle that just fine, unless it was something incredibly foolish or suicidal. In that scenario, he most likely would continue to do it out of a lack of concern for his own overall well-being. He was certain that it wasn't normal to feel that way, so perhaps there was something psychologically amiss. "Aniki, you were doing that weird spacing out thing again," Catherine informed Naruto as they sat on a couch in the house's darkened living room, her peacefully nestled in his lap as they watched TV. Naruto began to reflect on his lifestyle, his experiences, and his tendency to suppress the more traumatic events that had occurred in his life and their combined effects on his state of mind. Naruto gave Kitty a squeeze that made her smile too, and said, "Sorry Kitty," with an apologetic smile. Catherine wore a white t-shirt with an orange emblem across the chest and an orange skirt with yellow lines running horizontally around it. Naruto declared that she was wearing it to make fun of him because he didn't have any orange clothing on at the moment. Since they were merely spending time together at her mother's house, Catherine's hair was down to her back rather than in the usual ponytail, and she wore the necklace that Naruto had given her years earlier around her neck in a prominent fashion, as had become her habit. When Catherine saw through Naruto's smile, she couldn't help but frown. "Are you ever going to tell me?" she asked him in a worried tone of voice. "Tell you what?" Naruto asked, glancing at the younger girl he was holding. "You know what my job is. You've known what I do for a long time. Why would you possibly want to hear me talk about any of that?" Naruto was genuinely reluctant to discuss his previous missions and assignments. He didn't want Catherine to know what kind of monster he could be because she loved him. Once you could identify a real-life victim of the act, talking about killing became different. "Because now that Dad's gone, you don't have anyone to talk to about the things that have happened to you," Catherine said, hesitant to go on, but keeping quiet wouldn't make her father return. Her worried gaze shifted to his. "I might not be able to relate, but I can try. Just talking to other soldiers won't do anything for you. They won't think that anything that happened to you is important or a big deal at all." Even though he really wanted to argue against it, he had to concede when he considered the possibility of sharing his experiences with Snake. Yes, if he would listen at all, he would get no empathy there, and he wouldn't get any from talking to Wolf unless he was hurt, and even then, the injury would have to be the kind that would keep him off the field for a while. Otherwise, he would just be told to rub some dirt in it and move on. Regardless of what he disclosed to Catherine, who was unaware of his past transgressions, she would undoubtedly be impacted by even his mildest tale. He was unable to comprehend for this reason. When she didn't have to, why would she want to attempt to accept what he had seen and done? That was not how he ever wanted her to see him. He didn't want Catherine to ever be afraid of him or what he was capable of. He just wanted her to feel comfortable and safe in his presence. Even when they were younger, he never liked to use any chakra techniques around her. Even though things weren't easy, he liked that he was her big brother and wasn't just a body holding a weapon whenever he saw her. Even though he knew that normal was the furthest thing from what anyone could possibly label him as, it made him feel somewhat normal. She had no knowledge of Foxhound or any other counter-terrorism operations for that matter. He had been her elder brother Naruto for the previous 6 years. It gave him great satisfaction to know that, in that regard, nothing else mattered to her. To her, he was nothing like the strange man with extraordinary abilities or even a weapon made of humans that he was to almost everyone else. Despite their lack of relationship, she appeared to have an unwavering love for him. Nobody had ever looked at him the way Catherine had always looked at him. He could see the adoration in her eyes even when she was younger, and the older they got and the more distance that seemed to be put between them, the more he sensed her growing fondness for him when he returned, and that's not even close to the right word to describe how she felt about him. Naruto gave a headshake. "Kitty, there's just some stuff you don't need to hear. I'm not going to sit here and tell you about me killing people just because you think I need to talk to someone about it," he said, genuinely not wanting to tell her these personal details about himself. A finality crept into her voice as she pouted in his lap and crossed her arms over her chest. "Well, guess who's sitting on who and isn't moving until he talks about himself. And you're going to get hungry sooner or later, so." She was interrupted by a loud growl from Naruto's stomach, which put a smirk on her face. "Yep, right on time. That train's never late." "Yeah. I'm hungry," Naruto replied, nodding in agreement with what his tummy would not conceal. "You're forgetting something though," Catherine said, blinking, not sure what she had forgotten. "I'm super strong, and you're probably 100 pounds at your heaviest. Do you think it would bother me to carry your little butt all over the kitchen while I look for something to eat?" said Naruto, abruptly getting up out of the couch with very little effort. Shocked to find herself lifted so suddenly from the ground, Catherine began to wiggle around until she managed to let go and drop to the ground. Naruto stopped moving and cast an apologetic glance at her, but she responded with a mischievous smirk, tackling him to the ground while squeezing him tightly around his legs. "I'm not dropping this, Iniki. You're going to talk to me," she said. "What part of super strong don't you get by now?" Naruto asked, rolling his eyes at his sister's attempt to pin him down and force her to talk to him. He then bowed forward, wrapped his arms around Catherine's waist, and then decided to lay straight back in order to pry her off of his legs and gently suplex her over his body in order to free himself. Naruto, having established his point, sat back up to discover Catherine latched onto his back and encircled his waist with her legs. She said firmly, her chest pressed against his back as she held onto him, "I'm not going anywhere." If he'd been feeling violent, there would never have been any problem getting her off of him, but he doubted he could ever hurt Catherine, not even if she held a gun to his head. She only wanted to help, she wasn't trying to hurt him. Naruto sighed to himself as he maneuvered his upper body and slipped an elbow in between them until he was able to seize her with one arm and bring her around to face him. And there they were, face to face, Naruto on the ground, his arms wrapped around Catherine in his lap, her blue eyes gazing intently into his while she continued to cling to him. Knowing what he did about normal teenagers, 16-year-old Catherine shouldn't have seemed so adamant about something that seemed so insignificant at first, but here she was, staring him down. He finally asked her, "Why does this matter to you so much?" thinking that maybe if he gave her the "get out of the way or I'm going to kill you" look, she would back off of him. However, he could never do anything like that to her. "You are my very best friend. You always have been, and most of the things I've done were so that I could make Dad or you proud of me. Don't ask me why you're in that," Catherine said, her eyes softening as she turned to face her beloved older brother. "But the thing is, I feel like I don't know you at all, nothing important anyway, and that really bothers me because I love you," she concluded, a little agitated. Naruto told her with a smile, "I love you too, Kitty." When he had given her the necklace in the first place, just before he had left Alaska to enlist in the military, she had told him this. When she'd told him that all those years ago, he thought it was the cutest thing ever. It had taken her all those years to say it, but he'd only had to hear it once to understand, "You know that." "No, not like that," Catherine shook her head and turned her head away from him. "The truth is, I used to have a massive crush on you, Iniki," she said, brushing a few bangs of her hair out of her face to hide her blush. "And when you joined the army it never went away. Then when you stayed in contact with me it got bigger. And now I'm in love with you," she confessed, leaning forward to kiss Naruto on the lips. She put her arms around his neck and gave him a longer, more passionate kiss that was more in line with her feelings for him after she overcame that wall of self-control. She felt she could safely assume that he was shocked, but she never saw the expression on his face because she closed her eyes when she went in. Until she felt him begin to kiss her back, Catherine was utterly terrified of his reaction. "He isn't pushing me away," she exclaimed. The very idea of it made her ecstatic. Catherine knew she was pretty, as had been stated many times since she had enrolled in the public school system. The boys who frequented her company didn't seem to mind that she was intelligent, as long as they assumed that her non-stylish, stereotypically blonde personality would make her an easy target. By merely hinting that her older brother killed enemy soldiers with his bare hands and that she never knew when he would drop in, she managed to get those cowards to leave her alone. Hey, Naruto continued to assist her even after he left. She never really valued her appearance. Nevertheless, she felt beautiful knowing that Naruto would kiss her back because, in the end, his opinion of her was the only one that mattered. Leaning forward with her weight, Catherine forcefully knocked Naruto onto his back while continuing to kiss him and licking her tongue. He hadn't shoved her aside or said anything like, "Kitty, this is wrong," or, "I can't see you like that," or anything else she had anticipated him saying. He did nothing more than wrap his arms around her hips and hold her tight until she withdrew and turned to face him, panting from the intense kiss. Naruto was lying on the ground with his back to the girl, and his only direction of sight was up. He was rendered immobile by her incredibly bright eyes, which glowed even in the dim living room light. He kissed her back, not sure why. When she first started, no alarm bells went off in his head alerting him to the fact that what she was doing was wrong. However, as soon as the seriousness of the situation struck, he scowled and said, in a dejected tone, "You don't love me like that," as though it hurt to say it at all. "Yes, I do. This isn't some way of me grieving for Dad like I know you're going to say. I'm not projecting anything onto you like that. I cried all of my tears out already, but losing him just made me realize how much I didn't want to lose you too." Catherine nodded, staying where she was on top of him since he hadn't even tried to move from the position yet. When she had no friends at all, he was her best friend. When he had no reason to, Naruto had treated her as though they were real flesh and blood. He wasn't just some stranger who had once lived with her father, he was more than just a brother to her. Did she really need to tell him how much she valued him? Catherine's hands reached up to pull her shirt up, but they only reached her navel before strong hands beneath her yanked them back down into place. She met a fierce-looking Naruto's gaze, and he gave her the order, "Don't." His tone left room for debate for the time being. After releasing him, she watched as he got to his feet and offered her a helping hand, which she accepted. She watched as Naruto paced in front of her, seemingly engaged in a mental battle, as he slowly made his way over to the couch they had previously been sitting on. It was Catherine's hope that she had not broken him. If she'd been genuinely teasing him, it probably would have been funny, but she wasn't. There was a limit to how much one could tease someone, and that was definitely not acceptable. After a while, he stopped pacing and looked at her. He opened his mouth to say, "What the fuck?" with an abruptness that belied his seriousness. "You're 16 years old and you're trying to strip down on top of me, and for what?" he asked. Not because Catherine wasn't attractive. If he had claimed otherwise, he would be a flagrant liar. Rather, this was not the same as what had transpired between him and Wolf. It might be strange, but for God's sake, he watched Catherine grow up, and neither of them was regularly in mortal danger. He had known Catherine long before she was even a teenager. Furthermore, no one's birthday fell on that clumsy justification. It was quite abrupt, to put it mildly, for him to see her no longer as his little sister but as a girl who loved him. It would have been good to have had a heads up. Catherine firmly stated, "To show you that I do really love you the way I say I do, Aniki." Otherwise, she would never have thought of anything like that. She was better than that kind of girl, and she said, "I didn't know any other way to show you." In reality, Naruto detested girls who flung themselves at other people. Getting her clothes off was a whole other story from the kiss. However, he could tell by the way she was looking at him that she was almost afraid that he would be upset with her and reject her. Regardless of his level of surprise, he would never act in that way. He approached her and took a seat next to her. "So you really think about me like that?" he asked, receiving a nod in response. "How long?" he followed up. "When I first pulled you out of the water and got you all cleaned up, I thought you were cute. I always loved the whisker marks, by the way," she said with a small giggle before becoming serious again. "Then you became Big Brother, when I realized how nice you really were. Teaching you English was a blast when you'd flip out and start cursing in Japanese when you messed up," she confessed, pushing a bang of her curly hair out of her face once more, a nervous tic that had persisted for years. After getting another chuckle out of Catherine, Naruto attempted to defend himself by saying, "Hey, learning a new language was hard. So keep going," he insisted. Catherine smiled and continued, "You would always make time to talk with me, or just sit down and watch TV when I was by myself even though you hated TV. You would tell me those stupid stories that I love so much, you even let me sleep in your bed with you all of the time. I could talk to you about anything I remember when I talked you back when I first started growing bow." "Yeah, I remember that," Naruto abruptly interrupted, anticipating her next move. When she held up her breasts to make her point, it wasn't too difficult to figure out. C cups, what were they at this point? Why did she have to be so hot? Damn it. That wasn't something he needed to be thinking about right now. Are you uncomfortable? Catherine asked him, a wry smile on her face, only to have Naruto's narrowed eyes and intense focus pointed directly at her. Well anyway, I guess it happened when I saw you in the hospital after you came back from Iraq for sure. Before that, I used to talk about you so much in school that people would say I had a brother complex, but that doesn't count, she said, playfully sticking out her tongue. Why is it so hard to believe that I love you, Aniki? Catherine asked, a wry smile on her face. He refused to tell her about himself because he believed she was too innocent and nice to love him. How would she respond? Telling the world's sweetest girl that you've taken more lives than you can count is a difficult task. How do you tell her that you are aware of your origins in a different world? And if he became extremely enraged, he damn sure wasn't going to tell her about the demon in his stomach that was just waiting for an opportunity to take control of him and get away. Don't love me, kitty. Not like that. Not the way that you want to. It's not worth it. A smirk appeared on Catherine's face as she leaned to the side to place her head on Naruto's shoulder. That's not even you talking right now, she said confidently. You know you want to. If you didn't even want to think of me that way, then why didn't you just push me off of you when I was kissing you? She then pushed herself off of his shoulder and twisted her body on the couch to face him. After that, she gave him another kiss, this one much more restrained now that her suppressed feelings had been released. With a firm tone in her voice, she withdrew and met his eyes once more. If you don't want to love me like that, then why do you let me kiss you? Now stop being stupid, she said. What do you mean stop being stupid? Asked Naruto, arching an eyebrow at her before he firmly held onto Catherine as she slipped back onto his lap. Look at you. Catherine said, continuing to remain unyielding. Look into my eyes right now and tell me honestly that you don't adore me. Of course he wasn't able to. I know you do because I adore you, Aniki. You're my favorite person in the entire world, so open up to me. I don't want you going off doing whatever it is you do. And you don't have to talk to me about it right now. But I don't want you putting yourself at risk without realizing that you do have someone waiting on you. Naruto couldn't help but touch her forehead tenderly, all sincerity and intent on her face. There you go. You didn't need to try to fuck me to tell me that, he joked. Catherine patted Naruto's cheek and said softly, what if I wanted to anyway? Come back when you're 18. Ask me then, Naruto said in a playful tone, turning to face her as he kissed her hand. He then grinned at her after noticing her pout in his lap. He was hers, damn it, as far as she was concerned. Who knew what kind of woman he would meet while traveling across half the world? With this foreign woman, how was she supposed to compete? Actually, now that I think about it, Aniki, Catherine began to say in a kind voice, but her smile was too sweet to have any positive meaning. Are you a virgin? She asked. Are you? Naruto could only ask, glancing down at her. She gave him a disarming little stroke on the underside of his chin with one finger, chirping brightly, yes. Well done. Naruto yelled, before turning to face Catherine and throwing her onto the couch. He then got up and gestured for her to maintain it that way. Catherine rolled her eyes and muttered something under her breath. What was that? Can't make me, she said once more. Then Catherine looked up, seeing from the frozen look of horror on Naruto's face that he was about to launch into an epic, old-school tirade. She could have simply responded, of course if you're that worried about it I could always lose it in the arms of the man I trust. So how about it? As she batted her eyes at him. But, she was going to capitalize on his tendency to overreact and get some satisfaction out of this. No amount of 5 years of soldier humor could hide the red in his face when someone said, don't joke like that. Who said I was joking? Asked Catherine, who was still grinning at him. I'm sleeping on the couch tonight, Naruto muttered, twitching his eye in response to her carefree demeanor. He then sat back down on the couch beside Catherine, who curled up next to him as their conversation came to an end and they resumed watching TV. Finally, Naruto said, Sai, you know, it's going to take all night if you really want me to tell you the things that have happened to me since I became a soldier. You don't have to leave until Wednesday, so get cracking, shrugged Catherine and took a comfortable position, ready to hear him tell her anything he wanted to say. All she wanted was to be nearer to him and tell him, I still love you. I'll let it go for the time being. I'm patient, but in the meantime, I'll try to assist you. However small that just so happens to be, Catherine brought up another point before he could think of where to start. By the way, you never got to get anything to eat, she said. In that instant, Naruto's stomach spoke up and agreed with her last statement. Okay, fine. I'll start talking after I finish my food. Naruto was awakened at around 2 in the morning by a noise he hadn't heard since arriving in California. After carefully entangling himself from Catherine, he left her bed and went downstairs. Yes? He asked, putting his hand to his ear to activate his codec. An older female Russian voice addressed him, Naruto Uzumaki. This is him, correct? The voice asked, confirming his presence. Naruto questioned, a little uneasy at the voice, who is this? Olga was the only Russian-speaking person he was aware of, and she spoke English. How did you even get this frequency? Olga Gerlukovich was the only person alive who had his frequency. The other 3 who left Shadow Moses with him were Naomi Hunter, Otakon, and Solid Snake. Olga would never, ever start a conversation in English with him because that would make it too easy for him, and the girls seemed to enjoy watching him struggle. There was nothing like this woman. Calm down. My name is Natasha Romanenko. I was a weapons analyst and assisted Solid Snake with information on his equipment and the equipment of the enemies he faced. And you Naruto Uzumaki use very strange equipment from what Snake said. She sounded excited to be speaking with him, or maybe that was just him. She laughed over the line at his paranoia, well-founded though it was. Naruto sank into a chair and uttered, so what do you want with me? It's simple. I can't reach Snake. It seems like Snake doesn't want to be reached, Naruto remarked in a dismissive manner. If you were on his support team, are you really that surprised by it? Naruto asked, noting that it wasn't surprising given what he had learned about him and his personality during their time working together. No, not really, but in this case since I can't reach him I need your help. I hope he and Otakon are living well, but I couldn't help you find one of them. I could for a price though, Naruto said simply, ending with a smile that she was obviously unable to see. I don't know where he is. Natasha asked, so then, could I just talk to you? But then realized how strange that sounded and chose to clarify, saying, I'm asking you because I'm writing a book on the events that transpired during the incident. That surprised Naruto a little. You're going to what? He asked, sounding skeptical. He had anticipated that this would simply end quietly, known only to those who had been present. Yes. Natasha replied, I have the entire recorded conversations of the event between the support team of Snake and the man himself, and you seem to come up quite a bit despite the lack of knowledge of anything you did or your place in the incident. She began to speak with compassion. I found out too much because someone close to me gave me this information to protect me, but with all of the conspiracies and everything I've learned I can't let it be hidden. I would like your help. Naruto wiped his face with his hand and breathed deeply. This never gets back to me, understood? You can use my name since you're going to anyway and you're going to use everyone else's, and you can talk about the stuff I did. I can even tell you my point of view of how everything started since I was there for the beginning of the uprising. But you can't put it in first person from my perspective, and you can't say that I told you any of it myself. Speaking with someone who was genuinely present or involved didn't matter to him. She had enough information about him from their conversations during the codec incident, even if he chose not to disclose anything, to include him in the book. He wanted to ensure that the truth was revealed, or at least the part of the truth he was interested in knowing, if he was going to be involved in the damn thing anyhow. He was confident that most conversations about him were anything but flattering, so he was not going to be portrayed as an antagonist. In any case, this was a great way to inform Catherine of what had happened without endangering her. Should this book truly delve into the events surrounding the Shadow Moses incident and find a publisher, he would ensure that it addressed what truly happened to Master Miller. Perhaps she could even pen an incredible death scene for Liquid in light of what transpired. That would be wonderful. A first-hand account from you would be great, the last man standing from the Foxhound unit. Natasha responded, it was rather bothersome, but I was able to dredge up background info on all key players in the event, from everyone on our side, to the antagonists, so there's no need for you to say anything of your background here. It's good, because he'd probably lie regardless. I know about all of the nuances. I know about Foxdie, the origin of Snake and Liquid, the intended cover-up by Jim Houseman, and the major conspiracy from the shadowy figures behind it. In the dead of night, Naruto's eyes brightened and he asked, so you know about the people behind all of that crap? It was precisely what he was searching for. This extended beyond the actions of that prickly Secretary of Defense, Jim Houseman. "Maybe you can help me?" he asked, thinking that if it hadn't, the airstrike would never have been called off and he would have died then. "I know of them, not much about them. I don't know how to get any more on them. But just hinting at their existence would be enough for now," Natasha replied, her voice sounding pitiful. When Naruto found himself once more unable to investigate the circumstances surrounding him, he said to himself, "Fine, are you ready then? I don't know what you'll think is useful, so I'll start from what I think is important. It would be enough for you, not me. Whatever you have to add would be perfect." "Good. So I guess I'll start with when I started seeing the next generation special forces acting stranger and strangera. April 2005, age 18, Lyon, France. That evening, he had filled Natasha in on everything he felt she should know about his experiences at Shadow Moses Island and had given her instructions on how to send Catherine a copy of the finished book. He said that he couldn't tell her himself and that it was just important to him that she discovered these things when asked why. By his standards, the remainder of his stay in Los Angeles had been pretty dull. The usual fare, as Catherine had described it, had been fulfilled when he met her friends and proved to them that he was more than a fantasy brought to life by the family photos she treasured. He'd seen her at tennis practice, and he'd seen her daily life. He was also made to swear that he would return shortly. Although he was unsure of when it would happen, he gave her his word that it would. However, he promised to have at least one memento for her. Then he called Olga to let her know he was headed back to Russia and to let the others know. He was told, without any arguments or complaints, to get his ass on the first flight he could find and take himself to Lyon. He had to be there, physically, before she could explain everything. And so here he was, waiting for her while seated in an alfresco cafe copyright with 2 cups and a pot of coffee on the table in front of him. With his fingers tapping the table he sat at impatiently. Naruto, dressed in black shirt, orange windbreaker, and blue jeans, sat outside in the still rather brisk weather. Asking for directions to or from anywhere was a pain in his ass because he spoke terrible French just enough to keep himself out of jail, if he were to be Hinesta, and was therefore already irritable. The young woman with a Russian accent said, "Very smart, Uzumaki." Naruto heard this from behind him and spun around in his chair to face her. "You picked the closest possible meeting place adjacent to the airport. How inconspicuous," she concluded in a sarcastic manner. It was Olga, still with her short silver hair, dressed in a knee-high black boot, black skirt, black gloves, and a closed black leather jacket. Naruto gave her a once-over, his lips twitching in a slight smirk. "You look like you just came from a funeral or something." He turned forward again, rolling his eyes as she walked past him and started to pull out the chair across from him. "I don't need to hear this crap right now. If it wasn't twice as expensive I would have never left the fucking airplane terminal to wait for you. Keep running your mouth and it'll be yours," Olga snarled at him. "Anytime, princess," was Naruto's silent reply. The idea of a fight, particularly with Olga, excited him for some reason. The hair on the back of his neck stood up. For him, it had been too long since he believed he would be the target of an assassination attempt. He was what kind of sick bastard? "Man, I've got problems," Naruto thought to himself after missing it. Olga quickly regained her composure and dismissed the idea of a rematch with Naruto for the time being. She sat down and drew near to the table, telling Naruto that Shalashaska was currently in Lyon. Recalling Ocelot's alias, Naruto asked in a questioning whisper, "Ocelot?" Then he realized that, despite his assumption that Snake had gotten to him, he had never killed him. "He's here right now." "How do you know?" "As a matter of fact, why are you even here?" Naruto asked after Naruto had gotten to her before he had a good chance to kill the others. Hell, Snake had already killed all of them save Wolf. "We were contracted to work a mission down in South Africa. I'm to be heading up the efforts down there. By the way, speaking of leading, I brought your people here as well," Olga said, pausing to reach forward and grab one of the cups there to pour herself some coffee. She then started to add sugar and cream to her drink. That wasn't at all a bad thing. He wouldn't be alone, at least. "So how's that been working, by the way?" Naruto asked as he leaned back in the chair. Olga gave a shrug. "Very well, as a matter of fact. Even when Shalashaska visited my father's main base where they all were stationed, he merely assumed that Sniper Wolf had escaped before the cleanup crews came to cover up what they could of Shadow Moses, since she never got a second run in with Solid Snake. He didn't bother asking about it or them directly. And that girl Meryl, she took to wearing a balaclava around anyone other than those in that trio you sent me in case she could be recognized. My father knows nothing of her or Johnny, by the way. Shalashaka was very quiet on exactly what went wrong on that island. And she grinned. After hearing your explanation, I can see why. Really, wires. Naruto grinned back. Why fight like everyone else? If it works, it works. He told her what had happened when they had first met in Russia at Shadow Moses Island. He didn't know why Olga bothered to stay in touch with him, but she did. Why would you even speak with him? Though he didn't comprehend, he was still grateful. She helped him obtain the direct services of the best sniper in the world, so he felt compelled to ask, he and your dad Sergei are close, aren't they? You know what I want to do to Ocelot. Why are you telling me about Ocelot though? Why help me at all? She asked. A scowl appeared on Olga's lovely face. I do not trust Shalashaka. I can't prove it, I can't explain why, but I cannot help but to despise the man. He makes my skin crawl. At least you have honor. I feel safe when I turn my back on you because I know that you would not try to stick a knife in it for no good reason. Her grin returned, and I haven't given you a reason to do so yet. A smile spreading across his face, Naruto said, well, I try. No way I'd ever turn on you, Olga. I personally like having more friends than enemies in my life. Especially since most of my enemies I can't see. Olga shot back, taking a sip of her coffee. I'm not a ninja Uzumaki. If we are going to have it out, I want you to look into my eyes while I'm kicking you around. Just so you know that I'm better than you. Likewise. Naruto answered, realizing that you only desired to duel with certain individuals even if it meant getting rid of them covertly. You were saying though? He asked. Olga realized that he wanted her to return to the subject, looked away. But no, I do not trust him. His hair-brained scheme would have gotten my father and our men nuked had we gone to the island to assist in the uprising. He is still in my father's ear, by the way, telling him to wait, and another weapon like Metal Gear Rex will make itself known, and it will be his for the taking. He is taking advantage of my father's ambition to bring Mother Russia back to power in the world stage. That's why if he were to meet with an accident of sorts, or if he were to disappear never to be heard from again, it would help me sleep much better at night. With complete assurance, Naruto said, I'll see what I can do. He desired to apprehend Ocelot in order to question him briefly, usually regarding the extent of his knowledge regarding his experiences in 2003. Naruto was not very good at tracking down people of interest, so when Olga asked, do you know anything that would help me get to him? He was extremely helpful in helping him find Ocelot, who was now his only hope. Duh. Olga nodded as she took another sips, however it's flimsy at best. I need another day to make sure what I have is concrete enough for you to act on. I'm in something of a hurry though. I need to get down to South Africa to begin working there. I cannot leave my men there without me for too long. You understand, don't you? I'm actually here to procure some ammunition for them as well. At this moment, Naruto also poured himself a cup of coffee and said, well, yeah, of course I understand. Olga had nothing to repay him. This was their shared opportunity to achieve their desired outcome, which she was unable to seize on her own. That was where he came in, and since he had a falling out with her father and had helped to blow up the Shadow Moses incident, he was a de facto enemy of her father and could ensure that this would not be linked to her leaking the necessary information. If Olga had given Sergei Gerlukovich directions to Ocelot, how would he have responded? He had no idea that they collaborated in this way on purpose. Their working relationship was to remain confidential. She warned him, saying, this cannot come back to me. I do not want my father to believe I'm betraying him. With a small laugh, Olga set aside her cup and leaned forward, saying, discretion would be paramount if you were to actually take this off of my hands, Uzumaki. Naruto grinned and thought, well then you're lucky that you made nice with a real deal ninja Olga. I've got this, just point me in a general direction and let me loose. It was a cute little use of allegory. With a humorous reply, a ninja huh? She extended both of her hands across the table, seemingly inviting Naruto to grab them. Very well. Tomorrow night I'll have everything you need to begin. The others will as well once you find them. Olga finished as she got up and put on some sunglasses. I hope you enjoyed your little vacation so far, she said, letting go of a little slip of paper in one of his hands. It'll be over in a day or two. At this point in the conversation, Naruto couldn't resist giving her one last jab. even though it wasn't really an insult because he knew exactly what would annoy her. "You know, I didn't think it was possible. You're actually prettier than you usually are when you wear normal clothes," he said, watching her walk away. Olga stopped in her tracks but did not look at him, replying sarcastically, "And you're still an enormous jackass no matter what kind of clothes you're wearing." Then she walked away. Carrying a suitcase, Naruto thought to himself, sucking at French sucks, as he made his way through the streets, searching for the address Olga had written on the slip of paper she had given him. Even if he knew how, he probably wouldn't understand people when they asked for directions, so he couldn't even ask them. At least he was now on the right street, a main one, and he even located the hotel that corresponded with the name Olga had given him. Was the cost of his lodging covered by her? Because it was extremely elegant. When Naruto entered and proceeded to the front desk, the girl there grinned at him and gave it back. If only he could have asked, "Is there a room booked for Naruto Uzumaki?" in enough French. "Yes, sir. According to this, you are booked in room 518, one bed, for a 3-night stay. Would you like maid service?" the girl asked as she stood to get him his room key after entering his name into the computer. Her eyes lit up when his name appeared and his room number was displayed. She came back and gave it to him, saying, "No, that's okay. I'm a neat guy," he said, "thank you. If you have any issues, feel free to call the front desk, sir. We hope you enjoy your stay," the girl said, nodding and taking her seat again. After saying so, Naruto walked away from the desk and went to the elevator to get to his floor. The smile never really went away as he rode the elevator. "So Olga got me a room, huh? That better not count as another favor I owe her later," he thought to himself as the doors opened and he went outside to start looking for his room. It didn't take him long to find it. After entering the room, Naruto quietly said to himself, "Ocelot's my link," as he placed his suitcase at the foot of his bed and sat down. He could try to get the answers to his questions if he could track down and capture Ocelot. The ridiculous maze of questions appeared to be growing larger every day. Why was Dr. Clark, the former medical chief of Foxhound, taking him? Why did she have the right to carry it out and do it in a clean manner? Who was responsible for all the mysterious events at Shadow Moses Island that compelled Snake to take action? And how in the world did Ocelot manage to disappear without leaving any evidence at all? How could he have gotten away? A knock on his door at that precise moment caused him to startle and narrow his eyes. He pulled out his right wrist as he stood up, preparing himself with the small black blade in case he needed it by shooting a hidden kunai onto a spring-loaded wire and putting it in his grasp. When he peered through the peephole and saw nothing, he grew irritated. "Calm down, Naruto." Meryl stepped backwards, hands on her hips, and the familiar red hair turned to face her. "You're in a bad mood already and no one's even said hi to you yet," Meryl said to Naruto. Naruto opened the door after retracting his kunai back into his jacket sleeve. "I just got here not even 5 minutes ago." "What, did you guys follow me from the cafe copyright or what?" he said. As Johnny and Meryl entered the room, Meryl grinned slyly and said, "From the airport actually." She corrected with delight, "Wolf had eyes on you from the moment you walked outside. Why do you think Olga was able to find you so fast? Besides, our rooms are on both sides of yours anyway." It was a little strange to see Meryl and Johnny dressed like civilians. Meryl was dressed in black jeans and a dark red t-shirt with an explosion pattern in black and silver covering the majority of the front. In addition to his sideburns and beard, Johnny wore blue jeans, an open jean jacket with a white shirt underneath, orange sunglasses, and an aqua-colored bucket hat. Naruto gulped and turned to face the person who had grabbed hold of him. "Man, I'm glad she doesn't feel like shooting me anymore," he said, even though there was a sense of danger associated with the person holding him. "Wolf?" It didn't feel hostile. "Yes, little Proby?" Wolf asked, grinning, as she clung to Naruto and slammed the door of the room behind them. "I hope you took care of whatever your business was. Did you miss me?" Wolf was dressed in a white leather pair of pants, a tight white jacket that was unzipped just enough to show off her cleavage, and white heels. With some nervousness, Naruto replied, "Of course, Wolf." Really, there was something about the woman that made him feel as though he was constantly in danger when he was around her, and he enjoyed it. He did indeed have issues. By now, a few years had passed since he learned this. "Good boy." Wolf kissed the back of his neck briefly, "And you look all healed up too. I swear I will never get used to how fast you get over your injuries," she said, letting him go. Yeah, boss. Johnny replied with astonishment. You looked half past dead when we got to Russia. You didn't even flinch when that doctor said he had to re-break your arm to reset it right. Naruto was extremely irritated by this and didn't need to be reminded of it. The fact that it required far more than the doctor was willing to give him to become unconscious made it even more painful. Regardless of what they said, he was unable to receive enough anesthesia to numb his arm. Then he pulled his shoulder out and jerked it back into its socket. And Naruto would be damned if he was going to let that sadistic bastard feel the joy of seeing him scream in agony. Another brilliant example of why he never got along with hospitals, even the really shady ones that didn't need him to reveal his identity to. Johnny swiftly changed the topic after noticing Naruto's troubled expression. Miss Gerlukovich said that she had something for you under your bed that you would probably like, Johnny said. Naruto arched an eyebrow, stepped past them, and lifted the mattress, grinning to see Gray Fox's sword there, as if it were waiting for him. Naruto, chuckling to himself, took it up and gripped it firmly in its sheath. Hey, this is awesome. I'll ask you the same thing I did when you took that sword with you when we left Shadow Moses. Can you even use that thing? Meryl shook her head when she saw Naruto holding the sword and smiling like a child. He was never going to get rid of that thing. Naruto defended himself, earning a facepalm from Meryl, saying, I practiced for a month in Russia. A great soldier used that sword to save his ass, and he wasn't about to just let it sit there to rust and be forgotten about. What? Meryl retorted, a month isn't good enough to learn how to use a sword. What made someone so skilled at his profession so strange? If she became as skilled as Snake or Naruto, she wouldn't get that way, would she? However, Sniper Wolf was a bit odd, and the other members of Foxhound that she had interacted with were also dysfunctional. That was not encouraging for her. Naruto said, somewhat weakly, I already knew how to use it. Kind of, and he wasn't really lying. He was competent with a sword, albeit not as proficiently as those who had received formal training. But anyway, do you guys know why we're here? He asked, implying that their purpose for being there was probably more than just saying hello. Revolver Ocelot is here. You are here for Revolver Ocelot. For whatever reason you want him dead, Sniper Wolf remarked with a sarcastic tone of voice as she nodded and sat down on Naruto's bed. You're going to tell us why this is a big deal to you, aren't you? She asked. With a firm stance, Naruto said, he's the only one that knows what all really went down at Shadow Moses. And there's more than that. Someone I talked to while I was away apparently had an ear in on pretty much everything that happened at Shadow Moses and told me something that's pretty fucked up. Ocelot has the hard disk with all of the test data from Rex on it, he sighed, bringing attention to himself. Wolf had to admit that a guy like Ocelot holding data on Metal Gear Rex was downright terrifying, and she scowled visibly at that information, saying, that is extremely disconcerting. What would he want with it? She asked. Meryl saw the destroyed Rex after Snake and Naruto's battle with it and began soundboarding ideas, thinking, maybe sell it? Make his own improved Metal Gear? Maybe he's working for someone else? I don't know. The whole hangar was a flaming wreck, so she could only imagine what the fight was like in person. So that's why you're going to kill Ocelot? She asked. He shook his head and punched into Wolf's palm, saying, I'm not killing Ocelot. I'm going to capture him alive and then I'm going to beat his ass until he tells me what I want to know. Then, he noticed Wolf smirked at him, asking, what's with that face? She teased, ignoring Meryl's glare at her for insulting Naruto. You couldn't torture a live fish that was already out of water, little Proby. Meryl thought Shadow Moses was worthless, saying, you're too nice to torture someone you don't hate, and you don't hate anyone. That interrogation would be the same as you beating on a brick wall, no difference in the result. With a rolling of his eyes, Naruto said in a low voice that only she could hear, you said a lot of stuff like that about something else before I fucked you 6 months ago and how'd that turn out again? He claimed to have briefly noticed some redness on her cheeks. Data copyright Bayo. I've got you back at last. Sniper Wolf. 124. Naruto Uzumaki. 1 man so weak even in my imagination. Could you guys speak up so that other people could hear your conversation? Some of us don't really know what's going on here, Johnny said, scratching the side of his face. Meryl groaned to herself. Although Johnny was a pleasant guy overall, he tended to make mistakes and overlook details when faced with more challenging tasks than simple ones. Johnny boy, You've got to focus. You're gonna get us killed. She explained, it's simple. Naruto wants Ocelot alive. Ocelot is in Lyon. We're in Lyon. She punched her palm excitedly. So we're going to get the drop on Ocelot, break off a foot or two in his ass, and drag him off to parts unknown. She had to cover his ass several times with their grunt work since they had fallen in with the Gurlukovich mercenaries via Naruto. Naruto grinned and said, that's basically it. Then he turned to face Meryl and said, and I have to say, I like the enthusiasm. Meryl simply winked at him. Meryl scowled at Wolf as she concluded, and we haven't had to question her sanity yet. Wolf laughed a little and shook her head in amusement. You should have seen her when we were in Russia and she was doing daily work with the Gurlukovich mercenaries. She's like you except with red hair, female parts, no real experience to speak of, no special skills, and no superpowers. Naruto turned to face Sniper Wolf and said, and my jutsu aren't superpowers, that would imply that I just wound up with them. I worked for my moves. Wolf simply made a blah, blah, blah motion with her hand. Naruto nodded in understanding. So she's basically like a more fun me that's actually sexy, and without the futile nightly attempts to suppress PTSD. He gave a thumbs up. Johnny asked, perplexed, you have PTSD, boss? To Naruto. Naruto unequivocally and shamelessly confirmed, since I was 12. I've personally seen tons of stuff that would make you crap your pants. Seriously. Some of that stuff gave him nightmares. From watching Zabuza Momochi kill over 24 men with nothing more than a kunai in his mouth and no use of his arms, to fending off enormous snakes and Orochimaru in the Forest of Death, to fighting Gaara, to his own stuff with the Kyuubi. Subsequently, he was able to amalgamate all of those loved memories with the firearms, smart bombs, nuclear weapons, grueling experiments on himself, and the terrifying films that Catherine had forced him to watch with her over the years. It goes without saying that he was thinking of something particularly bizarre. With no idea how to carry the conversation further than it had already gone, Wolf simply changed the topic by asking, so, Ocelot? Fortunately, Naruto was more than happy to change the subject entirely, responding with a tone that was far too casual for the conversation they had just been having and the subject they were now discussing once more. Yeah, we're here to get Ocelot. Olga showed up exactly as she had promised, carrying the information she thought was essential for Naruto to move against Ocelot the very next night. This is everything I was able to find, Uzumaki, she firmly stated as he read on. He was hard to find, but he's supposed to be leaving tonight. That's something they just couldn't hide for someone that knows what to look for. You've got a very small window. She brought the matter directly to Naruto, who sat back in his hotel room as he went over everything she gave him in detail. As he committed the information to memory, Naruto's expression was one of intense concentration, particularly at the Riverside factory where everything appeared to triangulate around. This could have been Ocelot's way of escaping Lyon. No, Olga, this is great. At least you found him in the first place for me. It might not be a big chance, but it's better than not having a single shot at all. It seems that Ocelot had been on the lookout for a physician, and he had done a thorough search for someone who was both discreet and extremely skilled in their field. How come he needed a doctor at all? At Shadow Moses, Naruto didn't really hurt him all that much. The issue of the man's technical title also needed to be addressed. After reading the name of the doctor that Ocelot had most likely used for whatever reason he had traveled to France, Naruto raised an eyebrow and asked, what the hell is a next-generation physical technician? Olga looked at Naruto and started to clarify, next-generation physical technicians are the best surgeons in the entire world. Not only can they perform the normal surgeries that you and I deal with regularly, they are trained in research far beyond the scope of ways to operate on the human body. Naruto scowled at the way she gave him that explanation, acting as though he should have known. All he knew about doctors was that they repaired him when he was too shattered and bruised to get back up and get over it. He didn't like doctors because they always pretended he didn't understand how his own body functioned and what he was capable of, asking questions like, oh yeah. Like how? Olga listed the capabilities of these doctors, saying, they design and attach them to patients. It's an incredibly rare and increasingly sought-after trade, incredibly difficult to do. Cybernetic enhancements, fully functional artificial limb replacement, and even more. They even dabble in nanotechnology despite not specializing. Naruto examined Dr. Stinjan Markov's file. He looked extremely tall and thin in a 2000 photo, sporting a gray beard, wrinkles, sharp, piercing eyes, and gray hair. He was a man from eastern Poland who was well over 57 years old. He had never attended a formal medical university and had instead gained his experience on the battlefield by helping to put an end to revolutions in nations backed by the Warsaw Pact throughout Asia and Africa. This was not even taking into account the fact that he had gained experience during the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, which is possibly where he first met Ocelot. It was something to think about. He made a full transition into his current field of choice after the fall of the Soviet Union. Even with all of the skills he eventually developed, he was never respected because of his lack of a real, accredited medical background or education. It seems that in the past 2 or 3 years, he had made a significant innovation that went unnoticed and received little to no mainstream attention. Owing to his military experience, he also managed an elite group of soldiers for hire known as Olympus. While not nearly as large as the Gurlukovich mercenaries, they were nonetheless sufficiently large to serve as a personal security force. Naruto rubbed his temple, put the file down, and thought to himself, this is going to suck. Instead, he decided to take some time to strike up a conversation. With Olga's stiff nod in return, he said, "So, thanks for bringing the sword. It's pretty cool, right? Did you get to play with it any when I left it with you?" Jokingly, trying to start a light-hearted conversation. He could take everything to the others and they could figure out a way to operate and go about grabbing Ocelot, the sooner the better. Olga was so incensed at the thought of that question that her mouth fell open. She was extremely serious about her way of life. Her eyes narrowed at Naruto and she spoke rather angrily to him, who plays with a deadly weapon Uzumaki. "What do you take me as? I swear, you are the absolute worst, most unprofessional soldier that I have ever had the discourtesy of hearing of." She had to test the statement in her mouth in order to understand what Naruto had said. Without getting out of bed, Naruto answered dryly, "But you have heard of me, even before we met. And I didn't have to be professional to kick your ass and an entire squad of your men the first time, so if I'm so bad and I suck as a soldier, what does that make you?" He growled, blocking a punch that was aimed at his face before her other hand made contact and struck him in the face. He did not like it when people thought he was a bad soldier. Olga shot back, "Are you what?" with an acerbic retort that sent her flying across the hotel room and down the tiny hallway that led to the restroom and door. "You're going to pay for that," she growled as she sat up, holding her stomach and giving Naruto a vile look. She then got back up and assumed a fighting stance. With a red mark healing under his eye, Naruto said, "You started it." He was able to see where this was going and turned on the television and clock radio next to his bed. He sincerely hoped she didn't have a gun. Furthermore, why was the rock station on the clock radio in a hotel room? It was playing "Gotta Get Some Action Now" by the Helicopters. This was not going to defuse the situation in the slightest, he warned Olga no, with a voice full of warning. Naturally, this backfired. Since he was the one with the last licks, being told not to try to beat his ass would only make her want to try more. "You'd better defend yourself, Uzumaki," she said, darting across the room to quickly move in on Naruto, who leapt to his feet just as she fired off a jab. The instant he simultaneously grabbed her arm and ducked behind her, he locked her in a hammerlock with her arm behind her back. She cursed the fact that he was still so much faster than her without even trying. But all he was doing was holding her there, not uncomfortable, not trying to subdue her with it, not really. If he chose to handle things that way and she had anything to say about it, failing to fight her fairly would result in him being defeated. Olga whipped around to her free side and gave Naruto a back elbow in the face. Then she ran up the wall and rolled backwards over top of him, forcing him into the wall with his face facing her. This allowed her to escape. When Naruto turned around and his back struck the wall, he was never happier to discover that his own people were in both of the rooms opposite him. They wouldn't call the front desk over the disturbance, at least. But he would have to explain himself later if he didn't stop this. Olga lunged back at Naruto, but he caught her by the shoulders and threw her against the wall. After kneeing his inside leg and breaking his hold on her shoulders, she grabbed his shirt collar and kicked him 3 times in the stomach, knocking him to the ground and leaning back against the wall. Olga sent out a straight right hand, which Naruto dove under to hit her with 3 palm strikes to the torso, making sure he didn't inadvertently leave any more permanent marks on her, unlike the scar on her face. After that, they both stood back up. To avoid being repetitive, he began at her stomach and worked his way up. However, his final touch was a little too high for Olga's modesty, as he basically struck and groped her breast, causing both of them to look surprised when they realized what had happened. With no intention of making this end quickly, Naruto began to back off. "Olga, that was an accident, and you're not even listening right now, are you?" he said. Feeling visibly incensed at what he had just done, Olga dropped all technique and simply tackled Naruto to the floor in the tiny hallway that housed the bathroom door and the closet. When she got him down, she grabbed his legs and attempted to spin him into a knee bar, but the hallway was too small to give her enough room to execute the submission hold cleanly. Fuck, of course she would know Sambo. She was also very skilled at it. Her lack of size prevented her from using it as dominantly and imposingly against opponents who were larger or stronger than she was, but her flawless technique more than made up for it, as evidenced by how quickly she attempted the knee bar. Since Naruto could feel everything vital in his right leg start to take the stretching damage at the knee, she was also flexible enough to almost make it work. His leg would have been done if she had been in the open room. Nevertheless, they weren't, and she was close enough for Naruto to loosely grab her by the neck with his right hand. This allowed him to choke her until she struggled free and bit his hand. "Alright, enough domestic abuse," Naruto angrily ordered, biting back a yelp and using his free leg to vengefully kick her in the face. Then, he heard her reach down into her knee-high black boots, likely for a weapon, and exclaim, "Oh fuck that shit." As Olga's hand came to rest on the ballistic knife she always carried in her boot, she was startled to see Naruto sprint across the room towards her. Naruto gave her a dropkick to the chest before she could extract the weapon, sending her flying back over the bed and hitting her head on the far wall. After kicking Olga, Naruto hit his head on the ground and held the back of his head while both of them moaned in discomfort as they stood up. Olga leapt up on the bed to try a spinning front kick from her elevated position as soon as they locked eyes once more. After ducking under her and swiping her legs out from under her, Naruto knocked her onto the bed and moved in to try to restrain her. But when he did, his stance left him open to attack, and Olga managed to get a foot in between his legs and raise it sharply for a testicular kick. She smirked until she noticed the pain on his face and realized that he was also grinning. "Nothing?" she asked, looking surprised and receiving a headshake from Naruto. He firmly declared, "Never again." Liquid blasted him so hard in his reproductive organs that Naruto thought he had lost one for roughly 2 days afterward. "Liquid Snake kicked me in my junk as hard as he fucking could at Shadow Moses, and since then I keep them protected." Persistently trying to kick Naruto in the head, Olga moved to her side and, despite being blocked, asked, "You aren't a very good hand-to-hand fighter when you don't have space to be annoying, are you, Uzumaki?" As she continued to attempt the kick. Although Naruto's fighting was unpolished and untrained, it was evident that he had a plan and knew exactly what he was doing. Naruto, tired of blocking, grabbed her leg and turned her onto her stomach. Even though he wasn't very skilled at grappling, he was able to recognize a vulnerable situation and literally leapt at it. Holding Olga's arms out by the wrists to prevent her from using them, he pinned her face first to the bed. After a minute or two of struggle, she gave up trying to move Naruto, and she finally stopped wriggling. They just lay there, Naruto still clinging to her for his own protection because the last time he attempted to break up a fight with Olga, she used a knife to shoot him. Who knew what else this time around she had planned? He most definitely was unaware of her ability to use Sambo in this manner. Though they had engaged in a brief, spontaneous altercation, neither of them appeared to be in much worse shape. "Why didn't you use those clones of yours?" Olga grunted as she finally turned her cheek to the side to give him a sideways glance. "Because what would be the fun in that?" Naruto asked, keeping her in place and refusing to let the small talk weaken his guard. In response, Olga snorted and said, "Fucking bastard." In actuality, he had just beaten her. With a sneer, Naruto barked his teeth at her and said, "Fucking bitch." He then reached into the high-knee boot that he had seen her reach for earlier and took out her ballistic knife. When she did not respond, he threw the knife aside and asked, "Do you have anything else?" He was flattered that she had dressed up for him and thought it would make it easier for him to search more thoroughly. She stated, "I really fucking hate you," before cutting him off with an abrupt response to his previous threat. "No, Uzumaki, I don't have another weapon on me. Now get off of me." This was embarrassing. There was a dangerous adult woman in the world, and she was restrained by some foolish blonde who was lying on top of her. After giving her a brief moment of intense staring, Naruto jumped back off the bed and turned off the TV and clock radio. Her eyes panned up to him as he watched her sit up on the bed and attempt to smooth her clothes back up. They just stared at each other for a moment before Naruto lost control of his smile and said, "We both have problems," because that was way more fun than it should have been. "That's right," Olga uttered, a ghostly smile spreading across her own face. Even though it was impromptu and potentially violent, for both of them it was essentially just one big game with potentially fatal consequences. The question was, would I have shot or stabbed him with my knife if I had pulled it though? She chuckled to herself and then gave a mental shake of her head. Had she pulled that knife, he would have immediately stopped and she would have declared victory, putting an end to their altercation. She would beat him one day. She wouldn't let him have not one, not two, victories over her when she knew she could beat him. "I'll destroy you next time." Damn him for being so fast. She couldn't get it out of her boot. "We'll have to do it again one day." The unexpectedly pleasant discovery that there was no damage caused him to say, "Bring it on anytime, princess." In return, Naruto replied, "If you can find me, you can fight me." Olga nodded to Naruto, who was still inspecting the room for damage. "Did you check the bathroom?" Olga asked, clearing her throat gently before getting up and picking up her knife from the floor to tuck it back in her boot. "Well, I think I should be leaving. I need to head out to South Africa as soon as possible to join my men." Naruto asked, "Why?" as he peered past the bed to the spot where Olga had struck her head against the wall. He was confused when Olga pulled him into the bathroom by the arm and said, "My guns." After she had taped his pair of SOCOM pistols under the sink. He was still looking for any signs of their little altercation. "Were you really going to go in with just the high-frequency blade?" Olga asked, shaking her head, as she threw the handguns over to him and also took out about 15 magazines of ammunition for the guns. Though Miller had taught him how to take what he needed in the field, Naruto was trained in Konoha to always bring what he needed. He shrugged as he stared at the guns in his hands. "I could have. I am trained in procure on-site procedures." Well, he was trained, but he hated working that way. "Seriously, thanks though. I could have worked things out, but I hate going in naked." Olga said almost apologetic, "I would have brought your MP5K too, but smuggling that weapon was far more trouble than the pistols and the sword. Even getting your little personal transport into this country was easier than bringing your submachine gun." Soon after, she was pulled into an embrace. "What the hell are you doing?" Olga asked, edgily. "Thanking you," Naruto asked in a perplexed tone as he withdrew from her and blinked. "What did I do wrong?" he asked, observing the unhappy expression on her face. Olga said to herself, "I know he is not as clueless as he seems right now." He was familiar with male-female relationships, even ones as dysfunctional as the one he was in with the sniper, thanks to her conversations with fellow female assassin Sniper Wolf. Naruto was aware of what was proper. His own standards, however, erred on the side of caution relative to other cultural norms. He had a lot of expressiveness. If he didn't like you, he would tell you so, and depending on how much he disliked you and had a good reason, he might take action. As long as he knew you wouldn't try to kill him for it, he would hug you and say things like, "Sigh nothing, Uzumaki. Just remember what I told you I wanted for this mission, okay?" If he liked you. After leading Olga out of his room and into the hallway, Naruto remarked, "Got it. Remember, if you need my help, I guess I'll call you when this is over and let you know how it went." She attempted to finish for him with a sly smile, happy to hold something above his head, but he shook his head, asking, "What? You're saying you don't owe me a favor?" With a slight smile on her face, Naruto said, "No, not that. If you need my help, I was going to say don't hesitate to call me or one of the others that can reach me. I'll be down to where you need me in a heartbeat, Olga, because we are friends." He quickly closed the door and then stopped when he noticed a small crack in it. "And we love each other very much even if you are all Tsunere right now." Olga was about to pay for that crap, but first she had her leg lifted off the ground to kick the damn door right off its hinges. She walked down the hall to the elevator to leave, muttering to herself, "I hate that bastard. I don't even know what that last thing he said means." So she let him get away with it for the time being. It would take a few days before Olga was eventually told what the word, Tsunere, meant and implied. Regretfully, her father's men were employed during a period of physical training. Naruto's statement was not refuted by an enraged Olga, who, in an attempt to stifle her anger, started a brawl between the soldiers and then proceeded to single out and beat up every one of the young, blonde men because she could not see the real offender. Briefing on mission. The sniper wolf. "So just what were you doing in your room with Olga an hour ago, little Proby?" It was awfully loud, but Meryl and I could hear grunting and a lot of bumping around. She looked awfully disheveled when she left as well. "Anything you'd like to share?" Naruto Uzumaki. "A little time to spend together." Meryl Silverberg. "Amazingly amazing." Johnny Sasaki. "You're going, boss." Naruto Uzumaki. "Shut up. Clears throat. All right you guys. We don't have a lot of time for this to work out, so we've got to move tonight before dawn." Olga narrowed down his position to be on the shore of the Seine River tonight for sure, right in an industrial complex where the river joins with the Ran. "We can't fuck up and get busted because I really don't feel like running from Interpol." Sniper Wolf. "Don't worry about being busted, little Proby. Ocelot and this Dr. Markov wish for their interaction to be quiet. Thus the only way there will be any sort of alert sent to Interpol is if we are too loud to ignore and we're left behind and lose him. If the latter happens, then Ocelot will definitely call it in and try to get us caught." "Dick," said Meryl Silverberg. Sniper Wolf's response. "Yes, that would basically be the crudest terms to describe his personality." Sasaki. "Johnny. And it's just them. There's no one else there with them. That doesn't seem very smart, boss, even if Ocelot doesn't think that anyone knows where he is." Naruto Uzumaki. "You're right. That's why Olympus, Dr. Markov's personal security detail, is supposed to exist. I don't know anything about these guys, but if Ocelot feels comfortable doing business with them, keeping an eye on it, then they obviously don't stink." Sniper Wolf. Laughs. "Not all soldiers in the world are as famous as you or me, little Proby. There are others who are worth knowing about. We simply don't have the time to thoroughly investigate them. Just because we've never heard of them doesn't mean no one has." Meryl Silverberg. "You know that's awful, right? We are unaware of the capabilities of these individuals and the level of firepower they possess." Naruto Uzumaki. "You're correct. And for that reason, I see this as essentially a solitary sly mission. All of you have jobs, but I'm the one going in to deal directly with Revolver Ocelot and whatever other nasty tricks Olympus may or may not have in store for us. I'm a shitty teacher anyway, and this isn't the time to teach Johnny and Meryl how to do this on the spot. I'm better at that than the rest of you." Sniper Wolf. "It's a surefire way to end things when a baby is teaching babies. It would be best to take this course of action, little Proby, I should say." Naruto Uzumaki. "Wolf, I'm not a baby in a fight. Would you please call me by my real name instead? Is there anything wrong with being Naruto?" Johnny Sasaki. "Are you serious? Is that your name? I assumed your name was a code for something bossy, or completely fictitious. Like everyone in Foxhound, you know. By the way, there's nothing wrong with your name. You have the voice of the lead character in an awesome manga, or something." Meryl Silverberg. "That ought to tell you everything there is to be concerned about with your name, Naruto. As I previously stated, it's peculiar." Sniper Wolf. "It's funny, but I prefer calling you, little Proby, over your name. I doubt I will call you that instead, but maybe I will if something better comes up later." Naruto Uzumaki. "Sigh, now that I've called Kitty that, I understand how she felt. Anyway, to return to the subject at hand, Johnny, we're going to need a quick escape from Lyon when I sees Ocelot. You get that for us, I'll leave that to you. We'll have to move quickly, particularly if I can't grab him discreetly, because the moment they discover I took him, Olympus and who knows what else will be all over my ass. Johnny Sasaki. Boss, you got it. Do you have any specific requests? Naruto Uzumaki. Even if I were being paid to drive it, it wouldn't matter as long as you can do it. If anything, I want it to be quick so that it can accommodate our special guest, Ocelot, as well as the four of us. We'll need to be prepared to roll quickly, so you better get it quickly too. Count on me, boss, I'm your man, said Johnny Sasaki. Naruto Uzumaki. Meryl, you're with Johnny. What? Meryl Silverberg. No. Why? Johnny is going to shoot me. Naruto Uzumaki. Though what if, in the process of robbing a car, someone approaches Johnny from behind and splatters his brains all over the dashboard? Until you do something utterly stupid to betray me or any of us, I will continue to like you guys. You two are still rookies, and I genuinely want to keep you all alive. The first thing that either of you saw was Shadow Moses. Sniper Wolf. Just two naive fools with cute faces. Hardly able to lace up each other's boots, said Naruto Uzumaki. Sniper Wolf. Or know when the safety to your assault rifle is on. Meryl and Johnny. That was an isolated incident. Naruto Uzumaki. And since you both kind of stink at what the other one is good at, the two of you together make one very competent soldier. Meryl, you're really brave, you can fight, you can stand your ground, and you can hide really well, but you can't get past security systems or steal a car unless you have the keys. I've never seen Johnny fire a single shot, but he can hotwire military vehicles, drive anything, and breach doors even with the highest security clearance at Shadow Moses. Johnny Sasaki Jr. You knocked me out both times before I could even do anything, bossa. Meryl Silverberg. Naruto, I understand your point. Sniper Wolf. Kids, play nice. Uzumaki Naruto. Wolf. Sniper Wolf. Alright, my love. Tell me that Leon has a lot of hills, Naruto Uzumaki. Sniper Wolf. Indeed it does. And next you probably want me to tell you if I know the best view of the entire riverside. The answer to that is of course I do. We've been here for days before you got here. I had time to see all of this beautiful city. It's a shame we don't have time to enjoy it together. Naruto Uzumaki. Then that's where I would like you to be. You're my eye in the sky. If you see anything worth mentioning from your vantage point, then I want you to tell all of us. We're going to be in constant communication with each other until the mission is complete. And maybe if I don't get riddled full of bullets, we can go somewhere fun after I interrogate Ocelot. You're so romantic, little proby, said Sniper Wolf. Uzumaki. Naruto. Gura, okay, I'll admit I walked right into that one. Alright everyone, are we all ready to get this over with? This is going to be a walk in the freaking park. Remember this though. Rule number 111. No plan ever survives first contact with the enemy, so be ready for anything. Meryl Silverberg said, I'm reminded more of rule number 99 in this case, especially with you leading this Naruto. The more stupid the leader is, the more important missions he is ordered to carry out. Naruto Uzumaki. You know the rules too. Well then, be thankful that Johnny isn't leading this thing, or we'd be on a suicide mission to find and take out the entire upper echelon of command of the Taliban. Now let's do this. No one get caught, because trying to bust one of us out of custody would be hell. Sayane River upheaval. Principal goals. Acquire a live revolver Ocelot. Find and destroy the Metal Gear Rex test data location. Get out of Lyon and France. Secondary goal. Find out anything you can, and if there is any evidence of Revolver Ocelot's betrayal of the Gerlukovich mercenaries, bring it with you. April 2005, age 18, Lyon, France. As Naruto made his way to the industrial complex to start his mission, the air outside smelled like rain. Because of his attire, he could easily claim that he was just practicing parkour and free running in case he was discovered. It was apparently very popular in France, but Naruto was able to do things that would make those people envious. This evening, Naruto was dressed in a form-fitting, long-sleeved black shirt that ended at the fingerless glove attachments. His face mask, which was currently pulled over his lower face, was attached to the shirt. He had a black headband on, and across his forehead was the metal plate bearing his Konoha leaf insignia. Wearing a black pair, he was letting his shinobi sandals make a reappearance on his feet. He was wearing a sturdy pair of black pants with his standard equipment strapped to his belt and his SOCOM pistols holstered on each thigh. He had throwing knives ready for a quick draw, running up and down the outside of his legs. The sheathed HF blade rested on his back. Tough greaves meant to protect were stored in his forearms. His torso was not protected by vest or body armor. The way he had dressed at Shadow Moses, he was more concerned with speed tonight than with the possibility of a protracted battle. This is Naruto, about to enter the area to begin the mission. Give me some good news so we can get this started right. Where are you guys? He said, putting his hand to his ear as he continued to head towards the more shadowed area around the river. I'm almost in position, little Proby. You don't need me to tell you anything right this moment, do you? Was the first voice to be heard over the codec, followed by Sniper Wolf. As he carried out his acrobatics along the dark roofs, Naruto remarked, "No, I'm just making sure you're all okay." His friends were the low light and the clouds that covered the moon and filled the sky. He said to Meryl, "Johnny, what about you two? One of you talk to me." "We're all good, boss." Johnny replied quietly, "We're not as fast as you though, so we're not to the target area to begin our search yet." "That's all right," Naruto reassured them. "As long as you have time to get us a vehicle and get us an escape route all set to get Wolf out once we're done, it's good. We'll be done with it in no time. Just make sure you pop Ocelot in the mouth a few times for me, okay?" Meryl said, raising her voice over her own on-air radio. Naruto returned to observing the pitch-black darkness of the night as their voices faded away, as they would only be speaking in brief bursts throughout the mission. Since he'd entered the industrial district, he'd passed more small factories, storage facilities, and transport headquarters than he could have counted, and the closer he got to the river, the darker things seemed to get. He saw no cars at all on the streets he was walking down and around, and there were very few streetlights that were on. When he came to a spot where the lights were fully on, he dropped to the ground to start his journey through the dimly lit area. An abandoned truck stop near the river. Since that was the only location with lights and he knew he would need to be somewhere in the vicinity to begin his search for Ocelot, he decided to make that his first stop. Let's get this done quickly. He would have spread out his clones, but the only situations in which spreading them out was beneficial were those involving scouting, ambushes, and spying. Not for espionage. Additionally, they were carrying only their swords and pistols and not an MP5K. Because he didn't have enough firepower to make his proxy bodies effective support players, he had to be strategic about how he used them or risk being exposed or having his clones shot. In any case, a group of proficient clones or soldiers would be useless on this kind of assignment. Naruto moved around a large number of trailers that were stowed away, but when he noticed two armed guards, he suddenly ducked behind one of them. The Olympus group's uniforms were reportedly gray pants and white shirts with the option of a gray jacket worn over them. Naruto prevented himself from laughing when he saw that one of the men was wearing a black beret. He said, "Europe, all I can say is damn. I would not be caught dead wearing a beret even if you held me at gunpoint." Berets belong on handsome boys and stern senior officers. One of the men, walking with his patrolling partner, said, "That guy the doctor is with freaks me out. Why does Dr. Markov have to act like a real doctor and keep him here for observation? I would have bounced his American cowboy-looking ass out of here the second the surgery was finished," Naruto thought, referring to the fact that they both carried mini Uzis with red dot sights for more accurate aiming. "What kind of surgery? Ocelot's here for some kind of surgery. What is it? I'm so fucking old I'll bust a hip if I have to fight someone as awesome as Naruto Aga in surgery." Naruto silently pondered to himself before putting his hand to his ear for the codec. Wolf said over their open line, and Ocelot did take some substantial damage during Shadow Moses. The cyborg ninja, Gray Fox, cut his right hand off. "That's not as funny as you thought it was in your head, little Proby." When Naruto heard that, his eyes grew wide. Then, he recalled his encounter with Ocelot and observed that the animal never used his right arm during that fight. Was all he could manage. That, to put it mildly, gave him great amusement. A nicer guy couldn't have been the recipient of it. What was that? Fuck. Naruto swore and then clambered silently up the side of a trailer, just in time to see the two guards turn to face him from where he had just been. With a quick glance over his shoulder, Naruto got to his feet and leapt off the trailer, landing on top of the two of them and stomping them until they lost consciousness. Naruto was about to leave the trailer and carry on with his journey, nodding to himself that an early crisis had been avoided, when he noticed a figure perched atop the truck depot structure. A sniper rifle fired a single shot that was barely missed by Naruto, who gritted his teeth and dove back behind the trailer, asking, "What?" A male voice with a British accent exclaimed, "I can see your legs under the trailer too." The man in glasses, red slicked hair, and freckles on his face said, "You aren't going anywhere, friend. You've got the sniping expert of Olympus facing you down." Karen is the name, Sunshine. Naruto briefly peered over the trailer before having to duck back down lest a bullet pierce his skull. He was dressed in the customary gray Olympus garb, with his collar turned up and his gray jacket zip-locked. He was firing quickly from a semi-automatic sniper rifle once he had a target in sight. This guy was amateur hour in contrast to Sniper Wolf. Alright, a flashbang would take care of that bastard if he was trying to keep an eye out for Naruto's legs. Alternatively, Naruto could get close enough to use a smoke grenade to take down the pretender. It did not follow that the guy was safe from him just because he could see the whole lot from his position. A shot that sounded much closer was heard, and the red-haired man let out a sharp cry before Naruto could start fighting Karen. When Naruto looked, he saw his face contorted in agony. Then, he slowly sagged forward, falling from the roof to the earth beneath. Running over to Karen's lifeless, face-down body, Naruto saw blood accumulating from the bullet wound in the back of his skull. Serves that rank amateur right. Wolf's tone was distasteful, wasting shots like that and not even bothering to give his prey the courtesy of hiding for them. That man was no sniper. He used an ACOG scope, trying to make his weapon something that it wasn't. Naruto laughed aloud. Wolf became quite enraged about other people's skill at sniping. She had been trained to shoot in a very traditional and strict manner, so it was imperative that she sneak up on her opponents. As Naruto leapt to the top of the truck depot building and peered across the river at a rather prominent cathedral at the top of the hill across it, he said, "He really must have pissed you off." Karen was loud and obnoxious, the opposite of Wolf. Notre Dame de Forvia Diaresis Re Basilica, on the other side of the Seine River. Perched on the pinnacle of this church's bell tower, Sniper Wolf grinned as she peered through her PSG-1 scope and saw Naruto smiling back at her from the operation zone. Her own radio communication device was in her ear, and she said, "Yes, I can see you perfectly. I've got my eye on you, little probie. If I see anything, I will inform you, or take out the trouble myself. Good luck." With the receiver resting by her mouth. In partnership with Naruto. "Thank you, Wolf," Naruto said, glancing down at Karen's corpse and surveying the entire area. There were no other sentries in the area. This is just the perimeter. Ocelot isn't here, he's further down the riverside. Then you'd better get moving. Wolf replied cheerfully, the corner where the two rivers meet seems rather busy. Tell me when you get there. I can't just start shooting from here for no reason. It's up to you for now. Naruto sarcastically remarked, "Beautiful," before following Wolf's directions from her vantage point and heading towards the location where the two rivers met. With Meryl and Johnny. "All right, I think that's our best ticket to get all of us out of here in one piece," said Johnny, fully outfitted in the standard Gerlukovich mercenary gear. Orange and brown camouflaged pants and jacket, black gloves, black balaclava, harness across his chest with his sidearm pistol attached, and an AKS-74U in his grasp. Meryl sneered, "Gee, do you think?" She was dressed in urban camouflage pants, knee pads, and gray boots, along with a heavy black ballistic vest, black sleeves that covered most of her arms, and black fingerless gloves. She carried a Desert Eagle on either side of her hips. To spite him and maybe put a sour taste in his mouth, she tried her hardest to improve her gun handling skills instead of following Naruto's advice during Shadow Moses. They were both staring over the top of a brick wall from a building across the street, which happened to be encircling an old park that had become unusable due to the decline in the industrial district's quality. A set of binoculars so they could both see more clearly. From where they stood, They could clearly see a dilapidated football soccer pitch from when the park was in regular use. A US was seated on that field. Helicopter used by the military. Although Johnny couldn't tell which one was closest, he was confident he could take it. Then, of course, there was the problem of the soldiers lurking around the park, keeping watch over things. Dealing with that was going to be a huge hassle. What would they do while the helicopter warmed up, even if they made it to it and Johnny managed to start it? That's when the overcast that had been hanging over the sky for the entire week finally let loose and started to rain, which Meryl had recently discovered gave them an advantage. "Fantastic," she exclaimed. "Okay Johnny, are you ready?" Before they headed to the fire escape they had originally used to climb the building, Johnny answered, "As I'll ever be." "Oh man, I don't really do well in the rain," Johnny moaned as he held his stomach and completed descending the fire escape. He was not looking forward to trying his luck against over 35 Olympus mercenaries as they descended and headed towards the ground. Meryl noticed the growl that came from his stomach. Olga had paired her on patrol with Johnny for their convenience during their time in Russia, so she was familiar with this noise as it seemed to occur frequently. Now that they were about to sneak back into the park, it was back in the alley across the street. "Are you kidding me? I swear to God Johnny boy you had better be hungry because if you've got an upset stomach again I'm gonna," was what they said. As his stomach continued to wreak havoc on him, Johnny cried, yelling "won't help," and dashed off into the alley, grabbing a metal trash can for emergencies. It's a legitimate medical condition. In the darkness of the alley, Meryl heard his uneasy moans and shook her head, saying, "Gross. I really hope he has something to wipe with." In partnership with Naruto, as Naruto started to stroll around the periphery of a construction site, it started to rain. A 3-story building that was nothing more than the steel skeleton of whatever it was supposed to be stood in the middle of the property. An office building, perhaps? He had to go through it even though he didn't know. Fortunately, either Wolf had already eliminated the sentries who had previously been present, or nobody had arrived at all, which would have been advantageous for him. The construction site was full of stationary steel girders, plywood, brick stacks, mobile lights, and power supplies as he went through it, but it appeared as though no one had been there in a while. It was dark, at least. "Wolf, do you have eyes on us?" asked someone in the absence of even moonlight. "On Johnny and Meryl, yes. They are en route to an old park a few miles away from you." "On you? No, I know where you are, I just can't see you." That's understandable. The rain wasn't exactly helping, and it was completely dark outside. Neither did Wolf have a thermal scope. The more time went by, the more problematic her traditionalist habit was going to become, so he really needed to force her to upgrade her equipment. Actually, he also required an upgrade. Naruto finished, turning off his codec and moving forward, saying, "Keep an eye on Johnny and Meryl. If you can see them well enough try to help them along until I get out of here back to somewhere you can see." This was not his favorite place. Being dark was one thing, but there was a deliberate blackout. It felt too simple to him. There was only one thing that mattered to him about the location. It was practically designed for someone with his level of stealth. It was not intended for his use. It was intended for another person. And in the shadows, this other person fought the hardest. Naruto would not have been concerned otherwise, but he had already spoken to Wolf out loud over the codec. It implied that the individual was aware of his location. When his next move could mean death, there was always one default course of action. With their SOCOM pistols out and aimed toward the dark, the 4-cage bunch surrounded Naruto closely. "I definitely need new equipment," Naruto thought to himself as the clone on his right was being shot to death and knocked out by an automatic weapon that was silenced. While the original Naruto slipped away from his copies and hung back inside a stack of girders, drawing his own SOCOM and waiting for some sort of signal from his clones via their mental connection as to what action to take, all of his clones started firing in that general direction. Naruto quickly realized that another clone had been killed by gunfire and thought, he can see. He's probably got some kind of night vision or thermal goggles. Come on, I need a plan. With a mental command to his 2 surviving clones, Naruto created 2 more and they joined, dispersing across the area. Gunfire ceased and bullets bounced around the peaceful scene. Holding a flashbang grenade firmly in his hands, Naruto waited patiently, anticipating the death of his clones and making sure the shock of pain he would experience would not cause him to drop his grenade and alert his enemy with its clang. All 4 clones were shot down in a matter of seconds, but that was planned. Naruto was supposed to assist in determining the stalker's position by triangulating their position, and based on his memories of the clone death, the stalker didn't move as quickly as he would have if he had an advantage like this. They were probably not skilled enough to run stealthily, so they crept along. Naruto heard his enemy cry out in agony and hear the sharp crack of his weapon going off as he threw his flashbang grenade and turned to shield his ears before emptying his clip. It seemed that his gun had a small magazine with few bullets in it. But by now, Naruto had leapt out of his hiding place and was sprinting in the direction of the shout where he had launched his flashbang. He could hear his enemy, who was blind, struggling as he tried to reload his weapon. He wouldn't have the opportunity. At least one of Naruto's 4 SOCOM shots struck target, causing him to grunt in pain. Gotcha. Sensing his opponent's movements, Naruto raised his SOCOM, pulled out his HF blade, and with one quick motion, sliced straight through his intended victim. Naruto persisted in his sprint and drove straight ahead, pinning his opponent to the exterior sheet metal wall and sending him and himself into a construction trailer at the site's edge. Naruto twisted the HF blade inside his opponent as the sounds of the brief physical commotion subsided, and he heard him release a ragged breath as the blade hissed. Naruto suddenly jerked the sword to the side, cutting out whoever he had been fighting and hearing the sword cut through the cheap exterior sheet metal on the outside of the trailer. He could feel the blood staining his fingers as even the sword handle started to press into the wound. There was a loud thump as the body hit the floor. No one recovered from a wound like the one Naruto was certain he had caused. After almost being split in 2, not even he was certain he would have been able to stand up, and this person most definitely wasn't him. Naruto could swear that blood was all over his sword, even though he couldn't see it. It was his first time applying it to a human. He had become familiar with it in Russia, where he discovered that the blade's temperature could be raised by resonating at a high frequency, thus the name, HF blade. Naruto was glad he couldn't see his own nose in front of his face right now because he didn't even want to see how he had just butchered that man. It cut through the stealth guy like he was made of butter. He didn't need another featured guest in his nightmares, he already had enough of them. Sheathing his sword, Naruto swung it around, trying to get the blood off before continuing. Even though the fight had left his heart racing, he was saddened by how simple the battle had been rather than by what he had done to the mana. He wasn't going to die in the dark for no one. He wanted someone who could potentially end his life, someone who had a good chance of succeeding, if someone was going to try to duel him to death in that manner. One thing united Olga Gurlukovich, Revolver Ocelot, Sniper Wolf, Liquid Snake, Gray Fox, and Solid Snake. For the past 6 years, they were the only ones who actually made him feel like he was in danger of dying. The sense of impending death these people had instilled in him was unlike anything he had experienced since returning from his original world. Not the fear of dying, since Naruto didn't find dying frightening because he had already experienced death once. Not that he desired to pass away, he most definitely did not, but he did enjoy the excitement that accompanied the prospect. For him, a good fight was almost a high. If his job didn't make him feel as though he might die or face dire consequences, he wasn't enjoying it. There is no way that any clumsy, ill-prepared, extreme sports could ever match this sensation. He would never experience the real rush of a hand-to-hand duel against a person who would break his windpipe if he wasn't skilled enough to win in full-contact exhibition fighting. His heart would never race like it would in a shootout with a skilled opponent or against overwhelming odds, and neither base jumping nor skydiving would. He never felt important, except when he was grinning and staring death in the face. This mission was only getting started. The best thing was that nobody had any idea he was there at all. He enjoyed taking the lead in parties. Omake. The inception of a murderous bond. 2 months before, in February 2005, Kamchatka Peninsula, Russian Far East. Naruto found a doctor who fixed his previously injured arm in the small Russian town. He had managed to get himself, Sniper Wolf, Johnny, and Meryl into via passage on a merchant ship. While waiting, Naruto sat on the doctor's snow-covered roof, his gently worn brown coat covering his shoulders. The sound of snow crunching beneath someone's feet approached him as snow flurries descended from the sky over the sleepy town. The sounds of footsteps stopped right beneath the elevated position he was sitting at. It was too late for any random townspeople to be out and about, and there was absolutely no chance that any potential enemy knew they were there. Therefore, there was no reason to react suspiciously. As Olga stood beneath Naruto and peered up at him sitting on the roof, she remarked, "I didn't think I would be seeing you again so soon, Uzumaki." When he and Ocelot arrived at the Gerlukovich mercenaries' main base in December, she was dressed in the same winter attire. "And yet here you are using my own personal frequency and telling me to get here and to come alone. Did you really want me to defeat you so soon after we just met again?" she asked, her clothes still on. Without glancing down, Naruto asked, "Are you alone?" Right now he was looking up at the moon, not bothering to look down. "Yes, I am by myself. I did have to take a squad of my father's men with me to come here. He never lets me leave alone," Olga said, scowling as she realized he wasn't even looking at her. This caused Naruto to look down at her angrily. "I left them a few miles outside of town and came the rest of the way myself." "Why?" Olga asked. Olga was about to grab her gun when Naruto leapt down from his spot on the roof, but then she realized that he was doing nothing. "What do you know about what happened on Shadow Moses Island?" he asked, noticing her eyes flicker slightly to the left. "So you knew what was going to happen?" He narrowed them. "It seems like you survived well enough, but what are you doing here?" Olga asked, turning away from him. "Not until after you left." Olga answered right away. "You were meant to be killed. This I knew even though the details weren't given to me. I knew it and it made me sick," Olga said with an angry growl in her voice. "But it was either let a loose acquaintance be at risk or tell you what was to happen and betray my father's ambitions and trust. What would you have done?" "Yes, he lived, but Puppet Master Liquid made sure that at least one of his loved ones did not. Perhaps if he had known what was about to occur, he could have prevented it earlier. If only Master Miller had not had to pass away." Naruto let out a wry grin at his, "I'm not going back to the goddamned army, that's for sure. You know that story about me getting kidnapped after our fight that I told you the last time I was in Russia? Foxhound was behind that and it goes high up the chain of command. I'm not going to work for people and be a pawn to someone who I'll never see and whose name I'll never hear." Olga. "I don't have any allegiance to America or any country at all." Olga appeared to be annoyed. "And you think that you can just join me in my father's unit, don't you? He knows that you and Solid Snake were integral to the downfall of the sons of Big Boss, and he knows that you and he are the reason that his superweapon he was meant to receive the data to is lost." She let out a gasp. "If you were to come back with me and attempt to join he would probably put a bullet in your head the very first chance he got." And it was unfortunate. Even though she didn't think much of Naruto, he was more than capable. It would have been very beneficial for the Gerlukovich mercenaries to work with him. However, Naruto anticipated as much. He could ruin Ocelot's plans, and someone all buddy-buddy with Ocelot wouldn't take it well. "That's okay. Thanks anyway." Olga was taken aback by his thanks. "And what makes you think I meant I would have taken you back if I could? I just meant to say that if by some miracle I figured I could put up with you every single day and decided to take you with me, you would be killed as soon as we got there. And no one will be killing you except for me, understood?" Naruto nodded and muttered, "Tsunere," under his breath. "What?" Naruto covered his ass with a damning lie, saying, "Nothing," while pretending to have a coughing fit. "Sorry, I might be getting a cold." He stayed well, at all. "Would you accept Sniper Wolf if she were to head to your base?" he asked, getting back on track. Olga said, seeming genuinely shocked, "I thought she was dead." "No, she's in there. Her and 2 survivors from Shadow Moses. So could they join up if they made it to your base?" Naruto shook his head and gestured toward the house they were in front of. Olga said after giving it some thought, "Any begrudging issues like yours notwithstanding, I don't see why not. Working with Sniper Wolf, and she would only need to bring 2 more people along with her." Naruto seemed to think she would be doing him a great favor by getting over this deal. If necessary, she could even have the other 2 serve under her direct supervision to ensure their protection. "So all you want is for me to take these people with me?" Why should I? She might ask herself in an attempt to gain additional benefit from the situation. After giving her a stern look, Naruto slowly dropped to his knees and lowered his head, saying, "Please take them in and make sure they stay alive, Olga." He then raised his head, reaching into his pocket and dropping a kunai at her feet. "You can cut me the way I cut you if you want my blood as payment or something. I don't care. You'll have to cut really deep if you want it to leave even a faint scar like yours though." That was genuinely unexpected. After picking up the kunai, Olga approached Naruto, took hold of some of his hair, and forced him to turn his head so she could see more of his face. The way he scarred her, she could scar him too. However, she could see by looking into his eyes that he was genuinely indifferent. If she were sadistic enough to actually maim someone, she probably could have sliced him to her heart's content all night long, and she probably wouldn't have cared one bit. It was actually a little offensive. Did he believe she was a primitive and that she would be satisfied with such meager retaliation? He had scarred her face, so she wasn't interested in beating his ass. He'd already beaten her ass, so she wanted to take care of his. Olga pulled him to his feet by his hair, saying, "Get up, Uzumaki. I don't want to cut you. If I scar you, I'm going to do it fair and square in a true battle like you did against me." She then made him take back the kunai he had presented, saying, "Your scar will be a reminder of your defeat and my dominance over you, just like my own is now." With a sincere smile, Naruto said, "Keep it. Maybe you'll actually end up getting me with it in the future." Olga did as he asked and raised the weapon. "I said I'm not going to stop until I prove I'm better than you. I'm not going to stop at anything to defeat you," he said, and hey, it was free. If anything, his smile got bigger. Olga wanted Naruto to elaborate, and he did, saying, "Fine. If you want me to be honest, the idea of fighting you, right here, right now, it's exciting as hell." Naruto clarified, "Just because you want to fight me isn't a reason to hate you." "What?" Olga exclaimed, clearly taken aback by the reply. "It's been almost 2 years since then. You're probably so much better now after than you were then. Who knows what you can do now? And the same goes for me. I mean, I've got a sword. The next time we actually fight I'll probably know how to use it." Naruto began pacing around, saying, "The first time we fought we basically drew." Olga was about to counter that he was the one that won as his goal was accomplished, breaking the back of her ambush on the US troops and rendering her unable to continue, but he wasn't done talking. It was not exactly going to be a friendly encounter, to which Olga replied, standing in silent shock, "Not as much as you, clearly. Normal people don't exactly like the prospect of fighting the way that we're going to fight Uzumaki." She meant business. Like the first fight, this one was going to end with her coming for his blood. Naruto laughed sheepishly, "I'm not exactly normal, Olga, even to other soldiers. Fighting is all I know how to do, and you were raised by your dad learning how to fight too, right? You don't feel the same way." Then she cracked a grin, "Okay, yes. The thought of another fight with you, with both of us at 100%, she sighed as she examined the bandaged portion of Naruto's wounded arm, is stirring. She then raised her eyebrows, "But I think you'd be happy fighting anyone that would be skilled. I remember during our first fight you smiled way too much to be considered sane, even when you had the most grievous injuries. Even in a horrible fight to the death when you had lost more blood than a little bit, when you had taken sickening damage, you were still enjoying yourself. And do you remember what you said when I retreated and told you that you had won for today? There's nothing about me that's normal, Olga. Right from the very beginning, nothing's ever been normal," Naruto said as he leapt back up on the roof and took his previous position. "I said, come back and try me anytime, beautiful." He sighed, realizing the point she was trying to make. "So I like to fight. I like to fight so much that it actually scares people. So what? It's not like I can do anything to change it, and it's not like denying it would do anything." Olga stared at him for a moment before responding, "All right, Uzumaki. I'll bring Sniper Wolf and the 2 other soldiers you mentioned with me when I return. But for now I want you to tell me about Shadow Moses." Her face was marred by a frown. "I have a feeling that I will never be told everything by my father, and that Shalashaska left quite a few things out of what he told him in the first place. Naruto returned to staring at the moon while carelessly patting the area on the roof next to him. After a few seconds, much to his surprise, he felt Olga right next to him. She appeared to be waiting expectantly for his explanation as he turned to face her quickly. "How did you get up here so fast?" he asked, clearly impressed that she had gotten up there so quickly and easily. Olga was just grinning. "You think you're the only person in the world that can do your stupid acrobatics naturally. I've been training to kill you for 2 years, remember? Duplicating a few of your circus tricks is a no-brainer for a first step towards doing that. Now tell me the story." Naruto only hoped that a fight wasn't the only thing he could get out of this first arrangement with her, but suddenly, a fight with Olga seemed that much more appealing. "Okay, first before we start I have to ask you a question. Talking like this, how pissed off was your dad when he found out that the hind he gave Ocelot got blown up?" Was a positive step. Olga looked surprised for a moment before laughing slightly and asking, "You blew it up?" She was far more amused than upset. Olga said something that seemed funny to her, and she wasn't upset at all. "You were the one that flew it away in the first place." Naruto required companionship, because it seemed like his enemies were everywhere. Furthermore, they were operating behind the scenes in the world's most potent army. And if he pressed the wrong buttons in his quest for information about this conspiracy, there would be nowhere to run to or hide if the chips were down. He was by himself, with the possible assistance of 3 others. "Well, you're going to love hearing this." Olga shook her head with a disgusted expression on her face. "Nah, I wish." Snake blew it up. He wanted a good friend more than he wanted a good fight because he knew he would eventually find himself in a very heated battle. "I did blow up the entire tank hangar though. And wait until I tell you what I did to Ocelot because I can tell you don't like him."
I will continue the story in next part. Till then, we weeb offline.